to Jennifer.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, Drew. I don't think I've joined one of these calls before, so hello. My name's Jen Farmwald. I've been with DEP for about 15 years. The last 10 years have been with the Bureau of Water Supply. And in my current role, as the section chief for research coordination, my role is less to design studies and undertake research specifically, but rather to help facilitate and coordinate research across the Bureau and optimize it so that we're really ensuring that we are asking the right questions. So I help develop our research agenda. And then to a lesser extent, I also help stay in touch with research taking place across DEP as a whole. Today, I thought it might be interesting to talk a little bit about some of our work we're doing with disinfection byproducts. The focus of this will be more on the watershed side and the source water side, obviously, but I'll touch a little bit on the broad scope of research that's taking place there. And I mean, if you guys want to jump in and ask questions as it comes up, you're welcome to. Otherwise, I have some time at the end where we can talk also. Okay, so I'll just jump right into it. So first, I thought it might be helpful just to give us all an overview of what are DBPs. As an unfiltered water supply, the city uses both chlorine and ultraviolet light to disinfect water before it enters the distribution system. In this process of disinfecting with chlorine, the organics in the water react with chlorine and they form disinfection byproducts. With the city's water supply, we tend to have highest levels of trihalomethanes and haloacetic acids. DBPs are regulated by the federal government because they can cause birth defects and reproductive issues, along with increasing risks in certain types of cancer. So these are regulated by the federal government. There are numerous sources of organics. Which makes this an interesting challenge to address, right? So it can come from plant litter, soils, wetlands are a source of organics, but there's also a lot of in-reservoir processes that can lead to organic formation. And so we're in the process of trying to wrap our arms around those various sources, which we'll get to in a second. So that's DBPs. And then, so what do we do about it? As an unfiltered water supply, we can't remove organics. So how do we manage this challenge? We try to understand and model the system, which I'll get to in a moment, but we're developing models to help us understand quantities of organics so that we can optimize our system operations. We do a lot of field work, and we have sensors out in the field that can help collect data to help us inform decisions. We can use selective withdrawal within reservoirs, and then we can also optimize how we blend water, which reservoirs we're preferentially deferring from, and then how we treat as we get into distribution. Those are all kind of tools in the toolbox. It's also worth noting that DBP levels change over time, and both spatially and temporally. And it's, not only the amount of organics in the water, but how much chlorine we're dosing, how long that chlorine is in contact with the water, what's the travel time for that contact. Temperature is another one. So warmer temperatures typically result in higher levels of DBP formation. And then also the pH. So more acidic water tends to increase DBP formation as well. The challenges we're facing. So, DBPs have been regulated forever. This isn't necessarily anything new, but what we're seeing that's changing is challenges both in the regulatory side and with regard to climate change. So, when I first came to DEP, I did a lot of work on environmental reviews. And at the time, we had a lot of questions about climate change and planning for the future. But we didn't have, it was 2009 when I started with DEP, but we didn't have a lot of tools to understand how to project those changes into the future. I think now we're really starting to see what climate change might look like in the watersheds. So we know there will be increasing temperatures, and we're starting to see that. We're seeing increased and more intense precipitation, more frequent droughts, and nutrient loading. So these are climate challenges that we're aware of and that we're kind of starting to see. On the regulatory side, as these regulations, as these regulations are under review, we're starting to see more stringent requirements. So for the DBP rule, one of the proposed changes is to increase a minimum residual in the distribution system. That means more contact time and therefore likely more DBP formation. Although that rule has not been promulgated, it's anticipated that the review will start soon. It's on a 6-year cycle. It has been put forward, so that's something we're trying to understand and plan for going forward. And so all of this kind of lays the groundwork for some of the research that we've been undertaking. And that research is kind of, I bracketed it into 3 buckets, so to speak: the watershed, our distribution system, and also with regards to treatment. On the watershed side, we currently use something called the Water Quality Index. This is something that we developed in-house to help us day-to-day determine how to operate the water supply. It's not a model. It's something that we can use, at any time. And it uses factors like fecal coliform. And these are based on sampling that we're doing all the time, right? So it's fecal coliform, total plankton, turbidity, and an index that we use as a proxy for disinfection byproduct formation potential. And that's UV 254. It's a wavelength of light. It's very highly correlated with formation potential, and it's a great proxy to use. It's a simple sensor, so it's something that we've been using. We've found great success with it. So those components go into this index. You can use the index only for fecal coliform. You can use it equally weighted. You can combine 2 parameters. It's really flexible and it's really helpful. It is not a decision-making tool, but it's an information tool, right? So that's something that we have underway that we're currently using. I think most people on the call probably are familiar with the operational support tool. I won't talk a lot about that. If you have questions, I can hopefully answer that at the end. Our OST is a probabilistic model, and we can use that to understand water quantity day to day and also for planning purposes. It currently also has the ability to model turbidity. One of the new things that we're working on is a climate mode so that we can use climate change as another modeling output to see how, maybe today's precip, how that would look under different climate change scenarios. And in addition to the climate mode, we're also building out a mode that will use UV 254 to model as well. So those are functionalities that are in the works. And then most recently, we entered into an agreement with USGS. They're going to be undertaking work to add these UV 254 sensors to 6 locations throughout our watersheds, our Catskill and Delaware watersheds. And this will be hourly continuous monitoring for UV 254. I mentioned that it's a great proxy. And, if you look at the scatter plot of UV 254 against actual disinfection byproduct formation, there are outliers. It's very, very good, but it's not a perfect line. One of the things that USGS will do is using this more frequent monitoring, they'll be able to help us tease out and understand the circumstances where it's maybe not the best proxy. And that will just help us make better decisions and help inform our models. And they'll use both spatial and temporal variability associated with UV 254 to understand that. And then also later on in the project, help us identify the largest sources of disinfection byproducts formation potential in the watersheds. As I mentioned, there's many different sources of organics. We don't necessarily understand what sources result in the highest levels, like HAAs, for example. In addition to the watershed work that's underway, we also are working on a distribution model. So the idea is that when completed, we will be able to model this issue both in source water and in distribution from start to finish. The distribution model is in the early stages. We're looking at both a kinetic model, but then we're also looking at machine learning, and they're kind of going head to head to see which will give us the most accurate representation of our distribution system. And when this is completed, we'll be able to take a lot of these anticipated rule changes to understand, if a minimum residual of X is required in distribution. What does that mean for disinfection byproduct formation? And then finally, on the treatment side, so, the city is the Delaware system and the Catskill watersheds, those are unfiltered water supplies. As part of our filtration avoidance determination, we are required to have the design of a filtration plant ready to go. We're currently in the standard process of updating that design. It happens on a fairly regular frequency. But this update, we're actually doing more pilot testing. That's currently underway, and that will also help us understand this issue of DVPs with a little bit more resolution on the treatment front, whether that's a filtration or advanced treatment like ozone. And then this is my last slide, really. I talked a little bit about modeling from source to distribution. The goals are listed here. We've kind of already touched on that. But I also wanted to talk a little bit about, opportunities to share data. So, I think most of you hopefully know that a lot of our data is available publicly. It's on Open Data NYC. Also, all of, USGS data is available as well. And we also have some data that isn't necessarily publicly available. That's, we can't promise that we'll necessarily share it, but we do share it externally from time to time. So you're always welcome to approach us to have a conversation about that. As you know, we do a lot of monitoring in the watersheds, and that can be really helpful. One thing I was wondering about on our end is whether there are any weather stations that we might not be aware of. Having that Met data, more granular understanding of Met data is so helpful when you're designing these kinds of models to try to understand what's happening. So I thought I'd ask the group if anyone knew about any weather stations that maybe aren't an airport somewhere. And that's all I had for the presentation. I wondered if anyone had any questions or wanted to talk about anything or would like some more information. I also realized it's not part of the presentation, but one of the things that we do every couple of years is we publish a summary of all of the research taking place at DEP. So it's not just BWS, but it's wastewater and stormwater, et cetera. If you'd like, I can pull up that link and circulate it, or I can send it to you, Drew, if you want to circulate it. It's a publicly available document, so I'd be happy to share it.
That would be great. I would totally appreciate that if you would send that
Sure.
my way.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, I'll stop the recording in case anybody's a little shy asking questions on